In this video, I'd like to discuss training students. When we conceptualize the role of a teacher, we often think of a teacher as someone who has some subject, some content. They prepare lessons around that content, and then they show up every day and deliver that lesson to the students. In our case, of course, it's the scriptures. But I'd like you to think about an effective teacher as someone who understands and appreciates that content, but views it as a vehicle to train students on how to be effective lifelong learners. Let me illustrate for you. First of all, I want you to know about 3 words that I have in my head all the time when I teach, when I'm thinking about training students. And then when I'm done describing each of those, I'll show you how I do something every day that's around those words. So the 3 words are clear, they're concise, and it's then consistent. First of all, clear. I really think it's important to be clear or transparent, if you want to use that word, but clear to the students why we're doing what we're doing. So, for example, if we're going to invite them to highlight something in the scriptures, we'll just say, as you invite them to go in and identify something that's meaningful to them, and then make sure you highlight it or underline it, make sure that you are saying, doing this will help you to engage with more focus. Go ahead and highlight. Doing that will help you to engage with more focus. Or when we invite them to journal, we'll say, go ahead and write down how you feel about this. Doing that will help your thoughts to become more clear on this subject, or help your questions become more clear in your mind. So just little clarifying things about the skills. We want to be concise as well. So one skill or one question at a time, and not too wordy. We don't want to get too wordy about what we're asking them to do. Just practice getting really concise with your invitations, with your questions. And you don't even have to switch up the language all that often. Just regularly say clear and concise things and why we're doing it. And then consistent. Consistency to me is so important. If we just do a skill once and then every once in a while, then it's like reintroducing that skill all the time. I always think about glass etching when it comes to being consistent. When you want to etch some beautiful pattern in glass, if you only do one etching, then you'll sort of see it and it'll be faint, but it'll be really weak. You'll barely see it, and it actually can almost be scrubbed away. We want to get a deep etching into this glass so you really see a lot of detail and it's beautiful. If we try to do all of that at once, and sometimes we do, then you'll break the glass. You want to do soft, easy acid, for example, etchings on glass, and do it very consistently over and over in the exact same places, and then it etches deeply into the glass where it can't be erased, or it's not like you wouldn't really know what it was and it wouldn't break the glass. I think about breaking the glass when I hear a teacher want students to do a skill, and then when they're not responding, they sort of get frustrated and try to force that. Why aren't you guys doing this thing? How come you're not here today? That's sort of trying to break that glass or trying to make it go deep immediately. So be consistent. Do it regularly. But you'll get better at this. With your clear, concise, and consistent language, you'll get better at this. Let me give you an example from my classes. So I saw a need for students to be reading regularly, and I realized that accountability would help them with this. So for almost a whole year, I'd have students come in, and right at the beginning, they knew this was going to happen. I would just say, go ahead and report all, some, or none. This would mean I read it all, this would mean I read some of it, and this would mean I read none of it. And students had fun with that, and it was really good, and I did it consistently. But as I did this, again for a year, maybe just over a year, I started realizing that this had accomplished something. It had etched, but it only etched so far, and I wanted to go deeper. I realized that this was simply whether they read or not. And students started reading, but they weren't necessarily reading deeply. So I wanted to train them more deeply. So what I do now, and I assume the Lord will teach me how to do this better, but what I do now at the beginning of every class is I walk in, we start our class, we have our opening prayer, we have our hymn and our opening prayer, and then I will just simply say, go ahead and talk to each other about how you prepared for class today. And then I will, very importantly, I will remove myself from that environment, because I've learned that if I stay there, then they sort of look at me and think they're reporting to me. I don't want that. I want them to talk to each other about how they're preparing for gospel experiences. And as I've started to do this, it was a little clunky at first. They weren't really sure what they're doing. But now if you ask my students, Noah recently came into my office, and that's one of the reasons I'm making this video. And Noah said that ended up being the most important thing to him all semester, because he wants to know how to study the gospel deeply. As they get older, they'll want that more and more, but they're really not sure how to do it. As they have a brief 2 or 3 minute conversation with each other every day about how they're doing it, some of them I hear them saying like, oh, I Googled, this was the topic for the day, so I Googled some things, I came up with a conference talk, I'm really excited to share pieces of that conference talk because it helped me understand it. And that comes from being clear about why we're doing it, being concise, it's not a really dramatic long thing, and being consistent. We etch it every day. Have in our minds, we are trainers of people who are going to become lifelong gospel learners. We're not just there to deliver content, but we're there to help them to learn how to do these things for themselves. I know that as we have this approach, the Lord will be able to bless us to help them in meaningful ways. Thank you.